colleagues go. But
Okay.
You cited the sanctions on Iran, the banking sanctions on Iran, because of concerns of terrorism and all of that are still in place.
That's right.
There are people who say, yeah, but handing over a pallet full of cash is actually less secure. I mean, that money could be handed off and distributed to terrorists potentially with even less ability to track, ability to know what's being purchased, arms, other things. So, is there? I mean, was the White House at all concerned that they were essentially handing the Iranians a pot of untraceable money that is potentially going to fall into the hands of people that we don't like very much, and are doing things that we don't want to be doing?
Well, so let's just review. As I mentioned earlier, the United States continues to have concerns with some of Iran's nefarious activities. But the CIA director just last week addressed concerns that have been raised by critics of the deal about how money that Iran has received since January has been spent in Iran. And I don't want to ruin the surprise here, but the Iranian government has spent the money largely in the way that we expected that they would. Since the international community worked together to impose sanctions on Iran because of their nuclear program, their economy suffered. So it makes sense that when Iran got revenue as a result of the Iranian agreement, for example, the nuclear agreement, for example, they used that money to prop up their currency that had been significantly devalued by the sanctions regime. We also know that when Iran was subject to all of these sanctions, they were not able to finance infrastructure improvements. Their infrastructure was crumbling. So we know that they used a revenue from sanctions relief to start investing in infrastructure. We also know that they had significant debts that they were unable to pay, and they were eager to repay those debts, and frankly, their creditors were eager to collect.
You don't know specifically how that specific pile of cash literally was used.
What?
Do you know how specifically that money was spent by the Iranians?
Well, first of all, it's Iranian money, and I think what is true from all of the money that Iran has received since January, including from sanctions relief, which actually we know is more than $400 billion. It's much smaller than the hundreds of billions of dollars that critics of the deal predicted, but we can get to that in a little bit too. The analysis that we've done confirms what we predicted, is that largely that money was spent to address the dire economic condition of the nation of Iran. The president was quite forward-leaning in advance of the nuclear deal even being completed, in acknowledging that we know that Iran supports terrorism. We know that Iran supports Hezbollah and the Assad regime. And it certainly is possible that some of the money that Iran has is being used for those purposes too. That's precisely why this administration on the front end has been deepening our engagement with our partners in the Middle East to counter those activities, to more effectively interdict illicit materials that could be used to support Iran's ballistic missile program, to more effectively strengthen the defenses of our partners to counter Iran's nefarious activities. But the bulk of the money, we know, has been going to shoring up their economic weakness. And that's exactly what we predicted. What has not happened, and where the critics of the deal get it wrong, is Iran has not enjoyed hundreds of billions of dollars in sanctions relief. Iran has not been able to use hundreds of billions of dollars in sanctions relief to support terrorism or to prop up the Assad regime. People who made that prediction were either badly misinformed or lying to the American public. And I'll leave it to them to explain why their predictions didn't come true. It does explain, however, why they continue to resurface 6-month-old news stories to try to justify their opposition to an agreement that has benefited the American people, both financially and when it comes to our national security. All right, Olivia.